Okay, I'm doing this very high-tech video here because I wanted to add something to the debate that's out there regarding the current crisis in the church, and this is regarding the efficacy of the papacy of Francis. And here is my contention. If we go back to this book, which is by Malachi Martin, Father Malachi Martin, a former Jesuit, remained a priest all his life, according to his own description. If you take a look at this book, the copyright, if you can see it, I don't know if you can see it again, copyright 1996. So during this book was written during the pontificate of John Paul II, who was referred to in this book as the Slavic Pope. As you can see from the title, it's a Vatican novel. It was described by Father Martin as being a faction, meaning a work of fiction, a work of fact, written as fiction, so that he could put out in public events that he otherwise could not because of libel, slander, whichever the written one is. And so basically what the book describes is the attempt to make the Slavic Pope, which, how many Slavic popes have we had besides Karol Wojtyła, the current pope at the time of the writing, to gain control of him. The attempt was made by demon worshippers, basically devil worshippers in the Vatican. Believe it or not, it's in the book. Father Martin said in numerous radio interviews that it was an accurate portrayal of what occurred. And I want to show you this. And again, this is during the pontificate of John Paul II. Some very, and you can see here, Part 3, Papal Night, and the title there, The Resignation Protocol. What does that refer to? What that refers to is the attempt by the demon worshippers in the Vatican, their attempt to persuade John Paul II to resign for the purpose of eliminating the power of a very traditionalist conservative pope, and to gain one of their own as the pope. As we know historically, John Paul II did not resign. As a matter of fact, he made it past an attempted assassination, according to some accounts a second attempted assassination, and Parkinson's disease, all of which he managed to keep on soldiering on until his death. His successor, to the chagrin apparently of the opponents of traditionalism in the church, was Cardinal Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, who took the name Benedict XVI. And here you have the very next pope after John Paul II resigns. The very next pope is the first pope in 600 years to resign. This is a very curious thing, and I think we need to fit this into the narrative of what's going on today. In the book, Father Martin describes his opinion of the Vatican II, the Novus Ordo, Mass, everything else, but he was never a sedevacanist. And if you'll notice, I'm not proposing sedevacantism myself, because I would have a problem with the idea that the seat of Peter has been vacant for about 60 years now, since John the 23rd, since Pius the 12th rather. That would seem to indicate that the gates of hell have prevailed against the seat of Peter, which Jesus specifically said would not happen. But what makes more sense than for the Pope Benedict to resign, being convinced, although he said it was done entirely without any coercion. Maybe it was done with coercion. As a matter of fact, the way he describes it, it was done by coercion, because he felt that he wasn't strong enough to take on the challenge of reform in the church. If that's not coercion, what is? It may not be a kind of a arm twisting, hey, you need to resign, but it was definitely putting so much pressure on him that he felt that he could not remain in power and do anything about the tremendous crisis, which we're only seeing today. And what's ostensible Pope Francis doing about it? Well, he's keeping silent, doing nothing, blaming the great accuser, and doing everything else except something about this huge crisis of pederasty and predatory homosexuality within the church. So this is what I wanted to add. This is my first video, and like I said, you're probably utterly fascinated by my camera work, keeping it focused on one thing, but just with everything else going on, I felt it was important to bring this out one more time and to trot out Father Martin's work, which, as a relatively recent Catholic, I'm in my 10th year as a Catholic, and I've been fascinated by Father Martin's writings, and I feel like he had something to say. And I think when you predict something like a resignation of a pope, first one in 600 years, Father Martin didn't pull that out of a hat. He said that 95% of the events and 85% of the characters in the book were true. So it seems entirely possible that there was an attempted resignation protocol, meaning an attempted forced resignation or attempt to coerce a resignation of the Pope on the part of these devil worshippers in the Vatican. And if it didn't work on Pope John Paul II, it worked on Pope Benedict XVI, which, if you're reading the news and you read about this Galen mafia story about cardinals who wanted to get a progressive pope, and when they found that they had Joseph Ratzinger, realized that that wasn't the case, they tried to get him out. And who did they end up with? Cardinal Bergoglio, who I think has made his progressivism and modernism pretty clear. So what is it exactly that I'm trying to say? I think that it's going to come about. The Pope, the true Pope, Benedict XVI, is getting on in age. He's not going to last forever. No one does. And therefore he is going to come to the day where he passes on. And I think at that point, on a spiritual level, I think something very significant will be seen with the man who is calling himself Pope Francis. I can't predict it. I can't prove any of this. None of this is provable. There's no documentation for something like this, purely taking its playing itself out in the spiritual realm. But I think that on the day that Benedict is called up to return to the Lord, I think that we're going to see something really very, very interesting go on in the Vatican and the papacy. That's it for me for now.